Hi everyone, today we're gonna resolder an A11 CPU on an iPhone 10. Um, I have another video showing how to remove the CPU, which I will do later in the near future. Just it requires more editing. So I started with the second part first. It's a short video now. What you can see now is that putting some flux very lightly on the pads of the CPU, uh, the pads of the logic board where the CPU is going to be seated. Uh, and if you're doing that, you have to clean the pads and make them even and remove all the solder before putting on and resoldering the CPU. As you can see on the right side is the CPU that is reballed and ready to be resoldered. This is a little bit tricky. I use a Qianli gold stencil, 2D, not 3D, to reball the CPU. And I use 183 degrees solder paste. Should be almost done. And then aligning the CPU. Best way of aligning it is to when the CPU is on the board, you just go on the opposite corners, two opposite corners, and scratch a right angle with a really sharp blade, scalpel blade preferably, and make an angle, right angle at each corner, opposite corner, sorry. And here I am trying to align it. It takes a while. I have to be very patient. I have on the top right and bottom left corners the scratches on the board. You can barely see them. You shouldn't go too deep when you scratch the board because you might go down to a second layer. Take your time, make sure it is aligned because you only have one chance. If you don't align it properly, you have to reball it again and put it back, clean the whole process once again. You can use two tweezers, one on top of the CPU and the other one is to control it left or right or up and down. I'm thinking I've got it now. Maybe not. Yeah. It's really difficult to control. Okay. And by the way, this iPhone 10 was water damaged, and it started rebooting, and I checked. There was a short on PP GPU, even though it's really low resistance, but there were some capacitors on top. You can see those capacitors. It was one of the capacitors was shorted, and again I thought that would solve it, but it didn't. So I said, okay, let me redo the CPU. After removing the CPU, I made sure there were no shorts on the capacitors on top. Okay, I think it's aligned now. I'll take it out of the range of the microscope because you need to blow air vertically on it. I cut the video short. I'm checking now to see if it's properly soldered back. I use the widest nozzle that I have on my quick 861DW, and when you blow the air it has to be very slow, something like 40% airflow, and I use 280 degrees. And once the flux bubbles out from the sides, you know it's ready. You don't have to wiggle it or anything, just because that can short the balls underneath it. So just make sure it starts bubbling flux on the sides, and then you stop. Yeah, it's aligned properly. You can see the scratch, the top right corner, and on left bottom corner. All done. Okay, it's done. Have a nice day.